Altcoins and, of course, cryptocurrency are, of course, on the hot seat today. We're seeing a ton of transactions and a lot of action in the space. We're going to dive into it today with actually one of the coins that's out there in the marketplace that's making some moves, and that is Algorand. My name is Paul Barron. This is TechPath. Welcome back. Hopefully you guys are loving the content here on the show. Today with me, I've got the Chief Operating Officer of Algorand, which is Sean Ford. Great to have you on the show, man.
Thank you, Paul, for having me.
Listen, I listened to Vasily's interview with Lex, and was really my first introduction to really understanding. I had watched the coin for a little while, but it was my first introduction to really understand what you guys were doing. And I was fascinated by what he had to say, and I thought, hey, let's get you guys on the show. So I'm glad you guys could accept. Let's get into it today, Sean. Tell us a little about Algorand itself and kind of the mission of what you guys are trying to do.
Sure. So Algorand is a sort of next generation blockchain. The sort of brainchild of a man named Silvio Micali, who's an MIT professor and Turing Award winner out of MIT, along with a number of other tech luminaries and experts in cryptography and computer science out of a number of institutions around the world, and MIT being a prominent one. Algorand, really decided that the way that blockchain was being used originally, and Bitcoin in particular, was something that was unbelievably disruptive technology, but not really built for sort of mainstream adoption and use. And in addition to that, we felt there was a lot of opportunity for the ability to reduce what we would call friction across the exchange of value globally. We thought the internet did a pretty good job of removing a lot of friction around information exchange and really democratizing that. But there were a lot of, we thought, opportunities within the ability to remove the same kind of friction from the exchange of value. And launching Algorand in June of 2019 with a mission to really sort of redefine and rethink how value is exchanged in a broader future version of what finance actually is and is becoming, thanks to this technology and the digital assets that we're seeing sprout up.
Yeah, I like the one is the mission of what you guys are trying to do in terms of comparison to Bitcoin. We'll just use that one since it's kind of more of a stored value blockchain solution. When you look at other altcoins out there, something like an Ethereum, or much like what you guys are doing, Ethereum kind of going on the smart contract side of things, what makes your coin unique and different in the ability to go into mass adoption?
Well, I think it's a little less about, the coin is certainly part of it, but it's a little bit less about that, and I think about the technology itself.
Sure.
So
sure.
if you think about it, the simple example that I always give is that Bitcoin, again, revolutionary, but each block as it is propagated takes about 8 minutes, and that is very interesting in terms of the way that it propagates itself, and people are expending energy and a lot of effort to do mining, etc. But but it's a big barrier to adoption, because people nowadays use technology that, as you know, is sort of instantaneous, and the latency is near zero. So the analogy I always use is, if you bought a house and said, this is the smartest house ever, it's the greatest new technology there is in the market, and if you go into a room and turn on the light and it takes 8 minutes for the light to come on, no one is going to use that technology. So I think, from our perspective, it's the execution of how we built our protocol, which is the foundation under which you see all of the businesses that are building the currency that's on top of it, et cetera. And so what we did was we built one, and we felt like the tech actually is leading the tactics now. It's a type of technology that people don't have to compromise their user experience if they adopt it for a new process, a new currency, et cetera, or a new asset, et cetera. It's one that enhances that experience and really creates a better one for both the user as well as the company that's creating it, in terms of efficiency, speed, scale, all of those types of things. So when you asked about comparing what sets the Algo apart, I really think it's the Algorand chain. Algorand chain is open, it's public, it's permissionless. We took something called a layer one approach initially, which what that means is that we built into the foundation a number of core capabilities like our asset creation, like our smart contract, our core smart contract, like our swapping capabilities. We put all of those things into layer one to remove a lot of the developer risk that a lot of other chains saw, where you heard horror stories about
Right.
someone came in and maybe hit a wrong number and lost a lot of money. That doesn't happen on Algorand. So very secure, very scalable, and decentralized.
So, okay, so the technology itself, kind of the project in its entirety, is something that could be utilized. Could this be utilized in a lot of different applications outside of just cryptocurrency in itself?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the purpose, for us, if I let me demystify that. So the way Algorand has built itself, every blockchain, and I apologize if I'm being too simplistic. So I'm really not trying to be, but every blockchain is just what it says. It's a chain of blocks of transactions that are recorded and
Hmm.
propagate one to the next, right? And so if you think about that, we have with our currency designed a system that is called pure proof of stake. Unlike
Right.
Bitcoin, Ethereum, or proof of work or proof of stake. There's
Yeah.
different types, but that's not the point. The point is that on pure proof of stake, every algo that is kept online and is self designated as being online represents a vote. And each algo then can be randomly selected by something called cryptographic sortition to participate in the propagation of the next block. And so, because of that, the algo for us, it's certainly a currency, but it's also a means by which each block is able to propagate, as each
Mm.
algo out there, of which there's millions and millions, are randomly selected to do that. And so that is probably the first way I would characterize what the algo is in terms of both a currency and a way to propagate the blocks. And then if you think about that, I think it comes down to how easy is it for someone to adopt the technology and build on Algorand. We designed it to be as simple as possible. Given the speed of Algorand, there's no compromise on latency, as we talked about. And we've also, unlike a lot of other blockchains out there, the fees for transactions are minuscule, about
Yeah.
1/20th of a penny versus $30, $40 on some other
Yeah.
chains that are doing this. And so, if you're going to try to send someone $10, you don't want to spend $30 to do that. And
Right.
so all of those things have come together, I think, to really differentiate us against other blockchains, as well as really give a lot of credibility for businesses that want to come build on Algorand to do things beyond just the cryptocurrency, create their own
Right.
digital asset, create their own process that they think is more efficient and more effective.
So, from that side, and let me make sure if I understand this correct. In essence, I'm kind of curious, how does this maybe compare to the Lightning Network, where you're seeing micropayments? We just had a guy on that's doing some Lightning Network applications within podcasting to work on micropayments that are essentially dealing with the scenario you're talking about, which is low transaction fees, very speedy, all those aspects. How would that
Yeah.
differ than what you guys are doing over at Algorand?
Well, certainly. Look, so I'm not going to go into the Lightning Network, but I would say that one of the benefits is that so oftentimes there's an unseen set of activity that happens behind the actual transaction coming through. So if, for
Hmm.
example, if I wanted to sort of wire you funds, me as a user and you as a user may have what seems like a fairly simple set of actions that need to occur to get the $1,000 from me to you, let's say, as a payment or whatever it is. But there's a
Right.
lot of back office settlement activity that comes into play if one banking network doesn't have a direct relationship with another, if it's overseas, if there's certain sort of approvals that it needs to go through to be verified, plus the accounts need to be settled, reconciled back in the originating and receiving banks. So all of a sudden, it may seem quick to us, but the banks or the financial institutions or people that are looking to create new types of assets are experiencing a ton of time, could be weeks, to reconcile that transfer of funds. So, I think and by the way, on Algorand in particular, not every blockchain is this way. Every transaction is completely fast and final. So I can send you a payment, and within 4 seconds, 4.5 seconds, that payment comes from me and is in your account and it's done. There's no settlement, reconciliation, anything. And as a result, the cost, not just in terms of sending it as a fee that we talked about a minute ago, but the
Hmm.
back office cost to reconcile, settle, and file that type of a transaction is essentially eliminated.
Yeah, so that would be, in my opinion, that would probably be the killer app of what you guys are doing, because that, in essence, puts it into a position where this type of blockchain could be used truly as a payment device.
Correct.
Um, so when you have all of these companies coming to you to potentially either build on the blockchain, develop their own cryptocurrency or their own project, are there other aspects that companies are just looking at the payment or the potential transaction side of the blockchain as kind of the key thing? If you were to weight those two, which one seems to be the bigger market for you?
Well, I think the way I would think about it, Paul, is that we believe that we're creating a way for people to exchange value however they define value. And I
Okay.
don't want to be too broad and esoteric. So it isn't as literal as I want to send you $1 and you send
Right.
me something. It could be that we have funds coming to us from large financial institutions that wanted to create digital assets or digital versions of their funds, and these are
Hmm.
regulated securities and tradable funds, and they want to be able to do that because they can drive the efficiencies we talked about, but they can also expand their markets because they can fractionalize the value of certain things in ways that you can't with sort of traditional finance. And so, as an example, if you want an example, everyone likes to talk about the tokenization of real estate and how
Right.
that is sort of an interesting thing. Well, would you like to own a part of the Empire State Building? That might be kind
Sure.
of an
Yeah.
interesting thing. Do you have $50 million to participate in the sort of second mortgage, or the sort of the lending try or the investing tries? You probably don't. As an investor, you don't have the capital you need. But if you fractionalize that sort of that band of investment, you can make each of the digital assets that are backed by that collateral, say, worth $10. So maybe you have $1,000 you want to put into the owning a piece of the Empire State Building, and all of a sudden you're talking about millions of people that can start to participate in that type of a transaction, whereas before it was a handful of centralized
Yeah.
organizations.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, just the tokenization side of things, as we start to see a lot of action in the NFT side, we're seeing it, of course, in some companies that have even launched on their own, native tokens that has helped them, grow capital, all those kinds of scenarios that kind of play into this. But the fact that makes you guys unique is this whole transaction element that really kind of changes the game. And when you look at the network effect, Metcalfe's law is really kind of how cryptocurrency has been growing. Ethereum kind of is in that bucket right now where they have a lot of movement. There's a lot of acceleration. Do you see something like this happening in other altcoins? Because it is kind of a network effect scenario,
Yeah,
just like is anything out there today
yeah,
in technology for
yep.
anybody that's growing. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think two parts. One, I think that the fact that people are becoming more and more comfortable with blockchain and seeing its
Hmm.
potential now that like I said, the technology has gone in front of the tactics rather than trailed the tactics with many new
Right.
chains. So I think now that we're seeing that, that helps everyone, because now blockchain is a part of all strategic conversations, whether you're investing or creating a new business or creating a process. How can it be leveraged? Can it be leveraged? So that's
Hmm.
super helpful. I do think that the ultimate value is going to be driven by the quality of the technology itself. Because if, for example, you've got a platform that lets you, drive at the speed of light, let's say, but you have no brakes in that car, nor do you have a steering wheel, I don't know if you want to get into that, and you're probably very likely to crash. And so, we feel like there is a strong need for highly credible, really proven projects that ultimately as being part of that conversation. We think Algorand have the opportunity, not the guarantee, to be a real part of how people think about finance going forward because of the security. It doesn't fork, as all of the capabilities, speed, and all the things we've talked about before, and far more efficiently than really anything else in the market. So launching a blockchain, coming up with an idea to launch a blockchain, ironically, is easier than building a business around a blockchain that is focused on creating enduring value and that has real economic players participating in your ecosystem. And that's what Algorand's focused on.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Okay, so if you looked at, I want to go back to the kind of the altcoins because you guys obviously have a coin out there that that's obviously being traded, and the exchange, of course, I think as people learn about what Algorand's mission and kind of your secret sauce of what makes you different, could really take this coin out there to another level, definitely with maybe up there with the likes of Ethereum's or other coins like that, whether it's Cardano or Solana. Is that something you guys are driving toward to try to get the awareness out? What's more important to you, I guess? Is it the value of that currency or the value of the technology being amplified?
Well, first of all, first and foremost, it's the value of the technology. I mean, ultimately, the long game is, and you're probably at this point, Paul, very familiar with the sort of unbelievably interesting history of cryptocurrencies. I think that our focus at Algorand is 100% long-term, enduring value with regulated and credible partners. And ultimately, we think we just don't pay a lot of attention to anything but doing that. And at the end of the day, I think projects that take that approach and build disruptive and very strong tech will ultimately win out. But that's about the extent that we spend thinking about those things with respect to the dynamics on the algo itself.
Talk to me about, there's a term you guys use of DeFi to FutureFi.
Yeah.
Explain kind of that process for our audience.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I think the simple version is that if I step back, I think, and something I mentioned a minute ago, but the real sort of fundamental understanding of what finance is changing. You think about, finance as the exchange of value. Back in the day, it was, barter and trade. And then, now people have a general understanding of what they think of is encompassed in the financial space. And what we're seeing is the technologies like Algorand are really expanding the definition of what finance is. And within that, there's sort of the overused, but very well known now, sector of DeFi, which essentially is code for anyone who wants to create a digital asset of any kind. It becomes a bit of a miscellaneous bucket, which is unfortunate and does it a disservice. But there's different types of DeFi. There's ICOs. There's crypto kitties. Those could be a part of it. But there's real projects like Symmetria, who we announced today, who's a regulated decentralized securities exchange out of Israel, or Archax, which is the same thing out of London with an FSA regulation, or a Republic Note, which is a Reg A security that launched on Algorand, and so out of New York. And so there's a real big difference between the sort of the quality of the projects that you're seeing that come to what I would call credible DeFi. And so back to your question, how does DeFi to FutureFi? I think that there's an expansion of what people's understanding are of what finance is. I think that we're seeing DeFi, traditional institutions, traditional banks, traditional payment providers start to go, we really ought to start getting involved here because this thing's not going away. And in fact, if we're not involved, we're going to lose market share. We're going to, our position in the market may be eroded, or we may miss out on interesting growth opportunities. And so because of that, we really see Algorand as being a place where there's a convergence with, traditional finance, anything that represents, I would say, credible decentralized finance or DeFi, becoming a part of a broader fabric that is now an expanded definition of what the future of finance brings, and the opportunities, new processes, new assets that it could entail that didn't exist before, like, for example, NFTs.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and the likelihood is we're going to see such an implementation, I think, of crypto in general, especially as projects continue to get more advanced. of it actually making it into the mainstream public and being utilized in, daily use, just like a
Sure,
Venmo or a PayPal transaction.
sure.
So there's definitely a lot going that direction. When you look at the altcoin craze that's going on right now, are there any projects that you're kind of looking at and saying, this is an interesting thing that they're doing? What are your thoughts on some of those projects, whether it's an XRP or something like an Ethereum, in comparison to, say, some of the, I think just in general, some of the projects? I'm pretty impressed with some of these projects that are coming out on the crypto side. Is there anything that's impressing you?
So I'm not going to talk about any of the other projects. I never do, but I do appreciate you asking, Paul. I would say that we wish all those projects well, because I think the more innovation and disruptive technology there is, the more it helps everyone. And so, without giving a complete dodge, I do think that Algorand in particular has taken an approach that is focused on the things I mentioned before, and really, secure and trusted transaction finality. And others have come in with different takes on how to execute and drive adoption. Some have just gone with
Right.
sort of claims of pure speed. Others have gone with more of an assembly-like structure. And so I think over time, I mean, what I would say is we ultimately see a multi-chain future. I don't think there's, sort of one ring to rule them all, sort of the Lord of the Rings approach. I think this is going to be several chains. And I think that the tech that is the most solid and that can drive the right interoperability in a credible and secure way ultimately will be around for some time. And I think that people that are looking at altcoins, again, like I said a minute ago, like we really spend our time driving in on the quality of the tech, the quality of the team. We take a real business evaluation of how we look at things like performance and security and ecosystem value. And my only advice, not that you asked, is that a lot of great projects out there, a lot of unbelievable innovation, but I would just encourage everyone to take that same view. I think it's a good view, it's a pragmatic view, and ultimately, if people do their homework, I think you start to separate one project from another.
Yeah, I think you're right. The challenge, I think most, at least retail investors, when they look at, what kind of company am I going to get behind, from cryptocurrency, most of the time it's built on the network effect of what that company is getting out there into the marketplace, what kind of transactions we're seeing to kind of see the growth. But even if it's adopting certain kinds of technology like what you guys have built, I think that's going to be interesting. Okay, so you look at the issue of transactions right now probably being the biggest. I guess it's the biggest question that most everybody that's even in and around cryptocurrency is, when can I use this like I use my debit card? When can I use
Mhm.
this for a true transaction? We know that Bitcoin is probably not going to get there, just because of its infrastructure and the project itself. It's really a stored value use, kind of like digital gold is how a lot of people reference it. What are your thoughts on, could we see, crypto level transactions occur in 2021, 22? When do you think we'll
Yeah.
start to really see that at scale?
Well, so it's a great question. Look, I could make an argument that it's already here. I mean,
Hmm.
so it's an interesting. I mean, yeah, there's always issues, and I mean, Tesla's announced they're accept Bitcoin for Tesla, and
Sure.
there's a lot of companies that have publicly stated that they're taking specific positions in keeping Bitcoin on their balance sheets. I think that institutional investment, which is far greater than the traditional just crypto investor pool, is
Right.
driving a lot of credibility and mainstream use. But if you start to dissect what is crypto, you could take a few different looks. I mean, on the one hand, stable coins are very prominent. The Coinbase IPO recently, I think, is a big validator of how permanent the space is going to be and what people see as potential future optionality with things like USDT, USDC. So the sort of stable coin era is firmly upon us, and that's very
Yeah.
active right now. And I think if you look, I mean, we're even seeing, even in our ecosystem early on, you have the oldest coffee maker in Italy, Barbera, Cafe Barbera, is accepting Algorand specifically for payments. And if you look
Hmm.
at the NFT craze, you can buy NFTs on Algorand using algos, and
Yeah.
that is happening. So we are seeing a fair bit of traction down to, I think, the quality of the ecosystem, the variety of liquidity options that that ecosystem represents, and then the types of coins, be they stable coins or asset-backed coins of some construction. I think it's all, the gravitational pull is driving us towards, I think, broader and broader adoption. And as you know, the vast amount of exchanges that happen today don't involve, a truck driving up to one bank, loading up a bunch of paper money in it and driving it to the other bank. I mean, it just happens digitally anyway. So I think we're just seeing
Hmm.
a logical extension of something that maybe, is pretty prevalent in the world today.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, especially as we start to get to a point where, I mean, it's kind of snuck up on a lot of governments and, regulators in general
Sure.
worldwide, in the sense that it just has become kind of a mass, kind of like the internet kind of snuck up on everybody
Yep.
in reality.
Mhm.
When you look at things like that are happening in Turkey, where they are banning the transaction side of it, not necessarily the issue of holding crypto, but the idea of that you can pay with it. Do you feel like this could, at some point, where the government regulators are just going to start looking at adopting this technology, maybe even come to a company like yourself and say, listen, we need to create our own digital asset
Yes.
and move forward with this?
That's already happening. We've engaged with probably 15 to 20 different central banks around the world. There is a lot of activity on that front, and I would say, typically you get the entrepreneurial sort of DeFi space that's building and
Right.
rapidly innovating and trying things. You have sort of traditional banks and payment providers that some are out in front. If you look at a number of the announcements PayPal has made recently in terms of their involvement with the space and creating a blockchain unit. You take a look at that, you see that they sort of are starting to move out of both, a desire to innovate, as well as, a lot of traditional banks saying we got to get in this place. The government side usually falls at the end. There's a lot of innovation within governments, but they have a lot more responsibilities for their citizens and things that they need to really take into account. And of course, they're big organizations that are just no government. So I would say, however, even with that, there are a number of efforts around creating either improved efficacy in process and exchange of value within the governments, payments within the governments to
Yeah.
vendors and providers, as well as actual digital representation of the fiat currency that you see. There's a lot of effort there, and I think we're seeing some real investment being made to push into that new world, because again, far more efficient, far safer for their population, eliminates the need for sort of banking minimums to create accounts, and it really starts to open up a
Hmm.
lot of opportunities for more people to participate in long-term prosperity, even if it just means having an account that earns interest. That's a revolutionary thing for people in parts of the world.
Yeah, well, yeah, and when you look at the global adoption rate, most of the countries, per capita, are in most cases third world countries that either one have weak monetary systems, or they have a population that has just figured out how to circumvent the money, and they're moving quickly towards cryptocurrency. Now we're seeing adoption, in some of the nation states that if you look at what's happening in China and obviously here in the U.S., there's a huge movement on that. Do you think we could see a complete monetary shift to a digital currency, at least within the bigger currencies that
Yep.
are out there? I know China's moving in that direction, but what are your thoughts on that? Is that a 5-year thing? Is that a 10-year or a 2-decade thing rolling out?
Oh, well, so I think that, well, I'll give you the quickest answer I can. I think within 5 years, we're going to see, several digital representations of fiat or paper money happening at scale. I think that's probably
Yeah.
less than 5 years away, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I think fully, take the other extreme, fully replacing paper money, probably, I don't think that's going to happen. I would put the 20, let's say 20. I don't think that's going away
Okay.
tomorrow. However, I do think that there is, let's just look between you and me. I don't know how much cash you have in your wallet, I don't have a lot. I think I have like $4. So at the end of the day, most people are not carrying the big bulky stacks of cash in their wallet anymore, and
Sure.
people have become very familiar with sort of digital transfer funds. I think it's an easy jump to have people start to become sort of familiar and comfortable with a different type of currency for sure.
Sean, when you look, I mean, I'm sure you and Silvio and the team get around a table every so often and kind of look at the current space of things and say, if we could do these things, or what we're seeing within the space itself maybe a potential challenge for digital and blockchain technologies to kind of advance to the next level. Is there any one specific area that you say, ooh, this is one that all projects should be addressing at a faster pace than what's happening right now?
Yes, I think there's a few. I think one is interoperability, the
Hmm.
ability to sort of exchange assets, again, broadly defined, across multiple chains is something that has a lot of room for innovation and improvement, and it's certainly one of the top priorities at Algorand. I think to do it in an elegant way that, again, doesn't diminish the user experience, because that becomes a barrier to adoption. So you have to create something that makes it easy for that to happen. I think that's certainly one. I think another is really continuing to push on performance. And I think for
Right.
Algorand, and it sounds a little boring, but for Algorand, we take the idea of transactions per second. I'm not just talking speed, but it's transactions per second finality. And there's
Sure.
a lot of different takes on how things are calculated, whether it's, some just use block propagation time, like how long it takes to do that. That counts. And you can really ratchet up your transaction speeds when you make those claims. But ours is, I'm going to use the example payment made, payment received, all in the span of 4 seconds. So we see our ability to kind of continue to drive increased performance there. We see a short-term move to 10,000, and then a medium-term move to over 40,000 transactions per second without compromising that transaction finality. So that's I think a pretty important thing for us. And by the way, also within a secure network that isn't just defined as secure because you're in the chain making a transaction from one block to the next or within a block, but rather, how decentralized are you, and are you protected from other forms of problems when it comes to either
Right.
forking or disabling a part of the network. And of course, that can't happen on Algorand. So we're trying to do this in a aggressively pragmatic way, if that makes any sense, and continue to make sure that there's no question about how solid the tech is and its ability to do what people want it to do. So I would say that it's interoperability and its responsible performance increases are the two big things that I would say every chain should focus on.
Yeah, last question I have in terms of the team there at Algorand. A lot of times what we've seen with, if you look all the way back to Bitcoin and when it originated in the handoff between Satoshi Nakamoto and the team that was really kind of moving the ball for what Bitcoin was dealing with at that time. When you look at upstarts like yourself, obviously you guys are right there in the backyard of MIT. You've got access to some of the best engineers and talent in the world. Obviously that matters. What is it that you guys are looking at mostly to try to build Algorand's kind of core base and its ability to kind of grow at the next level, whether it's payment engine, people looking at payment, people looking at digital currency moving literally countries into digital currency. Where are you focusing, I guess, because there's so much you could be doing in the area of cryptocurrency or
Sure,
just
I
in
think
cryptology?
Sure. So I think, look, broadly speaking, because we're open, public, and permissionless, we just want to have a platform that's easy to build on and that anyone can come. So, like a country that had very attractive, sort of investment policies, you'd hope people would come there and organically build. And there's a big part of
Right.
that we're investing in and making that happen. I think that as we look more broadly, we've described it. We are focusing on, I would say, regulated and credible DeFi with our time. time. We are focused on being a bridge for traditional finance and people that are looking to sort of participate in what we see as a future digital reality that is expanding how they can grow their markets, et cetera, et cetera. And we're also at the table, I think, very importantly, with central banks, because it's those governments and those central banks that have a need to be aware of the potential of the technology beyond some headline from 10 years ago. And I think
Right.
that it is a great source of innovation. It's a great source of learning for whoever is in that country or whomever's there trying to develop new tech and generate new jobs and new opportunities. And so we play in those three areas pretty heavily with where we spend our time, while trying to maintain and continue to maintain this open, public, permissionless approach that lets a new idea sprout up organically. Think about it as
Yeah.
small business growth and development, and that we try to enable. So that's what we spend a lot of our time doing, and that's why you mentioned some of the people. I mean, we talked about Silvio McCallie, but our economic advisor is Paul Milgram, who won the Nobel Prize for Economics in 2020. We've done a really good job, I think, of pulling people who've been there before, that are very smart, who built real businesses before, and combined it with revolutionary technology that we hope will be around for a long time and give a lot of opportunity to a lot of people to participate.
Yeah, well, Sean, listen, it's very fascinating. I love diving into kind of the engineering behind what's happening in this space, and you guys obviously caught our attention and what you're doing there at Algorand. I love the open side of it, and definitely the different approach toward the blockchain itself in terms of the use cases that could really be kind of factored in here. This is going to be a very interesting thing to watch you guys grow for sure. Thanks for stopping in on the show today. We really appreciate it.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you so much, Paul.
All right, so you guys are listening in, maybe over on the podcast. As you can see, we cover a lot of cryptocurrency topics, EV, autonomy. We dive into a lot of technology around robotics and AI. So this is the show for you if you like those kind of things. And of course, you can always subscribe right there and leave us a rating. If you are watching here on the YouTube channel, make sure and subscribe right now. It's the best way you're going to get all of the new content here from TechPath. If you have an idea for a show, shoot us an email to producer@revernetworks.com. You can also hit me up on Twitter @PaulBaron, or the show itself, which is just TechPath TV. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.